Welcome. I am Asa Lanham, the Chief Executive Officer of Innovaro, and this is part 8 in our series on innovation for executives. And in this section, we're going to talk about innovation culture. And yes, I know I told you before that part 7 was the final part, but after we've given the seminar to some folks, they've come back and said, we really need to talk a little bit about the culture of innovation and what it takes to really embed it down and make it happen inside an organization. So we're gonna do that. Now, before I jump into the actual culture, I wanna reset a couple things because it may have been a bit since you looked at some of the earlier presentations and that. I want to just briefly talk about a couple of things. One, about what is innovation, and classical definitions, and there are arguments over this already about innovation being the introduction of something new. It's a new idea, it's a new method, it's a new device, and people really truly do distinguish between innovation and invention, right? But I want to reinforce the fact that innovation is not just about products and it's not just about markets. It can include the use of new technologies, it can include new services, new internal processes, the way you operate, what your cost structure looks like, how you manage the business, your business model. There are lots of areas to innovate, and don't think that all innovations result in something new and exciting and sexy in the marketplace. Okay? Second thing I want to talk about briefly is that innovation takes a lot of different forms. There are two fundamental. There's incremental. It's more of what we've done. It could be new capabilities in an existing product. It could be an adjunct to a new product. It could be a new product with new things in it. It could be an improvement in our service. It's a lot of different things. And then there's disruptive, and disruptive is truly radical. It dramatically resets customer expectations. It changes the basis for competitiveness, right? Simple one that many of us are familiar with within our business and careers and our lives are the change from regular cell phones, which started as you could make a call and then you could send a text and then you could take a picture. All of those were incremental changes. You had a little better screen, you had a little better button, you had a little better text, and then suddenly there was the smartphone. And the smartphone was just a disruptive innovation in that whole area. And part of what you've got to look at is what's the goals of your innovation program within your organization when you're putting this in place. Is it all about new markets as opposed to existing ones? Is it a first mover or a fast follower, or is it a smart mover, right? So there's a whole set of things you can look at in terms of what the goals are and your portfolio objectives. If you remember, we talked about our framework for innovation. That's what we covered in a lot of the earlier videos about the governance of innovation, the management of innovation, and really the 4 I's. And we talked about creativity. Well, in this one, we're going to talk about the culture of innovation. And I want to tell you that culture underlies all of this. Companies either have or do not have a culture of innovation. If they have it, they regularly produce innovation in a lot of areas. If they don't have it, something may happen occasionally. Things fall from the sky. But it's more likely that when that new idea or that new service or that new product comes up, it's either going to get squashed or somebody's going to go somewhere else to see about getting it done. So the culture of how you do this, what your organization does and accepts and cherishes is really important. So culture underlies everything. Now I'm going to introduce a model that we use that really is a very, very simple model. We talk about people, process, and products. And over the years, I've been involved in a lot of instances where people go, geez, something's wrong. We're not getting out the product that we want. Why don't you come in and take a look at our product? And the product is produced through a process. And the process is run by people. And a lot of times if you want to fix the product, you got to fix the process and you got to train the people. So the first one that I want to talk about as we go through this will be people. And we're going to talk about 3 fundamental aspects from innovation standpoint. That's leadership, attitudes, and skills. Those are just fundamental to a culture of innovation. From a process standpoint, there are really 4 things. There's the resources for innovation, there's the tools for innovation, it's communications about it, and what are the events? What are the kinds of things that as an organization you have to celebrate innovation? And last but not least is the product. Now, since we're talking about innovation, what we're really going to talk about are the outputs of the innovation, culture itself, the results and the metrics. So it's not the products it produces, but it's what's the results that the innovation process produces for your organization, okay? So let's take a look at these. Let's first focus on the people aspects, and we're going to take a look at leadership, attitudes, and skills, right? From a leadership standpoint, innovation requires a cultural or organizational change. You either have it or you don't have it. If you don't have it, you've got to change your culture. Corporate immune systems tend to squeeze out new ideas. We don't have time, we don't take the risk, we don't have to do those things. And frankly, our organizations over time evolved to be built for efficiency. They're about getting things done fast and cheap, not lots of different ways to do things. We all try and have one way that everybody does something, to keep it simple. Doing something, it requires setting time aside. You've got to change behaviors, and if the leadership isn't pushing it, right, then I can guarantee you, there's an old phrase that says, what you don't measure doesn't matter, or what you don't manage doesn't matter. So those are the kinds of things that are important from a leadership standpoint. And that leadership's got to be visible, right? Kind of just saying, yeah, we ought to do something about innovation, not being visible, not being involved. I can tell you quite frankly that innovation programs and innovation projects that don't have champions fail. They just fail, right? So there's that. Talent, every great team has people in different roles and responsibilities, but it has someone that leads it. It has someone that's really making that thing happen, and that's very, very important. And talent, some people are born with a talent for leadership and innovation. Others, you can train it. You can bring those skills out in individuals. And last but not least, it's really the driving it. It's embedding it. It's what are you doing, all right, as a leader? Actions speak louder than words. If you don't review your innovation program, I guarantee you it's not going to do anything because you're telling people it's not important, right? So that's very, very much a part of what leadership's got to do. In the second part, it's about attitudes. And attitudes, let's be honest. If you innovate, you're going to fail. And companies don't tend to tolerate failures well, right? I will tell you within the last month or so, I sat with a group and we were talking about innovation and venturing and we talked about the failure rates on innovations. And they were shocked. They were stunned. They talked about how the fact in their culture, failure was just not an option. That it was easy to get things started, but when you failed, everybody came and I won't use their exact phrase, but it had something to do with looking in places with a microscope that you don't want people to go. So you've got to learn to tolerate failure, and that is as a fundamental part of the process. You're going to have them. The thing to do is to make them cheap and fast, and to capture the lesson from the failure, right? Oh, and last but not least, in this group, it's to make them visible, right? If you don't know how someone failed, how's anybody else going to learn, right? And don't punish the people that try, because I can guarantee you, if you punish the people that tried and failed, no one else is going to try. Seems pretty obvious, but we do it all the time. And sometimes we do it very subtly. We say, well, maybe their judgment wasn't as good as it should have been. Maybe there was this, maybe there was that. I know one company, a very large, very successful company, did a big study on their executives, and what they found out was that if you make 10 bets and 9 of them are huge winners and 1 of them fails, you fail as an executive. If you make 10 bets and they're all small, or they make a little bit, you succeed as an executive. The executives that made a big bet and failed, even if they were way out ahead of other stuff, right, were basically, persona non grata as far as the executive team was concerned, right? And also, you've got to remember that innovation is a social process. There's an old phrase that success has 1,000 fathers and failure dies an orphan. I've heard variations of that a number of times. I can tell you I've worked in organizations that had big R&D groups that put out some amazing new products that are massive undertakings. And I can tell you that everybody that worked on it claimed to be, the person that made it happen. And you know what? They were all correct. They were all correct. They all made it happen. Everybody did their part. There might have been one person that kicked it off, but everybody did their part to make these things happen, right? And as Thomas Edison said, Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb, by the way. What he did do was he made a light bulb that could actually be efficient, had a reasonable life, and the cost wasn't terribly bad, right? And as he said, doing all the experiments, he said, we know 1,000 ways not to build a light bulb. So that's a key part of this social process. And the third part in the people is the skills. In an innovation process, innovation culture, you've got a lot of roles. You've got champions, you've got evangelists, you've got black belts, people that really understand it, people that facilitate, people that collaborate. Think of quality programs, all the different rules that exist within the quality programs that we learned over really a decade to put in place. You have to have people in all those roles, and they have to have the training to make those roles work. So that talent isn't just inherent. I mean, there are people that may have predisposed attitudes for, but they don't have the talent for it. Someone's got to train them. It's you might like to listen to a piano. It doesn't mean you can play one, right? And unless you're trained to play it, there are some people that are self-taught, and there are an awful lot that aren't, right? And hiring, one of the objectives, if you really want to have innovation, is you want to find a way to maximize diversity in your organization, in your culture, right? We said before, organizations are built for efficiency, not diversity. I'll tell you that early in my career, I spent a number of years working with IBM, inside IBM, in some of their large, research and development labs. And they had a term they used to use, and I don't know if it's still in Parlay today, that they call the wild ducks. And the wild ducks, they talked about, all the ducks were in a flocking together. And then there were these ducks that were kind of off by themselves. They were different from everybody else. But the wild ducks were important to them because occasionally the wild duck would run in and yell, "Eureka, look at this!" Right? And by having that diversity, by having the different perspectives, by having people that thought not the same way everyone else did, they got great ideas. They got great opportunities. Did all of them work? No. But a lot of them did. So they encourage wild ducks. Now, you can't have everybody in the flock be a wild duck, let's be honest. But, you need a few of those. You need some people that are outside the norm. And frankly, one of the biggest lessons that I learned after I left IBM was that people succeed in a lot of different ways. They don't all have to look like each other to be successful. Okay. And then last but not least, it's training from a skill standpoint. You got to figure out who you're going to train. Is it going to be company-wide? How are you going to deliver this? Small companies, you might get them all in a room. You might do webcasts. You might do videos like this. You might have seminars. You might bring them in. Remember, there's an awful lot of social interaction in this. So I recommend not having isolated instances of training. But that training ought to be organized around the mindset, the process, the methods, and the tools. So it's not just, innovation is a wonderful thing. It's, okay, this is what innovation is all about. This is the culture we're trying to build. This is how we're going about it. These are the tools we're going to use. So you got to have training. I want to talk next about process. And process really breaks down into four things that we'll look at: resources, tools, communications, and events, right? And they're really pretty straightforward. The resources, the first one, and I touched on this earlier, first resource is bandwidth. You've got to give people time. Right? And the number one reason that most innovation projects fail is for lack of time. And we've all had those things that we wanted to do and we wanted to get to, but we never made time for them. In the computer industry, in processors, they talk about context switching. And computers multitask. And one of the big issues was how fast can they move from one task to another, right? That's entirely different from the first one. And we all have that. Your head's down, you're working on something, and suddenly you've got to do something else. Or you have to go off to a meeting on an entirely different topic, right? And you do, and you come back, and you have this cycle time where you've got to start again. You got to come up to speed. It's on the other topic. So, bandwidth. If you don't provide bandwidth, it's not going to work, right? Cash. Let's be honest, right? The old phrase is "no mun, no fun," right? And we've all worked to reduce expense. You've got people doing more than they ever were. In terms of the roles they do, do more with less, right? But don't expect it to happen out of already existing budgets, right? Now, the other thing I want to talk about with that, and I want to talk more about this later, is what I call betting a little, a lot, right? And I know one company that can't try an innovation program without betting at least $20 million. And you're thinking to yourself, well, how far down do you go to do this? And the answer is they go way down through the actual engineering cycle for an innovation. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, that's kind of crazy, and I'll talk about those a lot. So think about spreading your bets, right? We all know that the people that do a lot of betting, that's what they do. They spread them, they lay them off, they do all those things. Why? Because they know they're going to come out better if they do. And last but not least, it's about assigning people, because people are part of the resource that we have. And I want to touch basically on Whirlpool, because they did a very important thing when they decided they were really going to make fundamental changes in their organization and go into innovation. They had about 75 people that they had in 9 months of intensive work together on innovation and the program and the results, and really going through projects and things of that nature. And after that 9-month period, what they did was they split them up, right? And they put a third of them and they sent them back to their original work that they were doing to spread the gospel about innovation and how you can do it. They used a third of them to be, innovation consultants, right? That's, here's the important thing to do with that. And then the other third they put out there to lead innovation projects, right? And the innovation projects were the new things that were happening that were demonstrable, projects that were innovative that were being delivered. So think about your people. Think about how you're going to make your resources. If you bring them in, train them, send them back to their day in and day out jobs, and don't give them any time, don't give them any resources, I can guarantee you that nothing's going to happen. Right? Nothing's going to happen. So let's talk about tools. We have a lot of tools in most companies we use today. I mean, we got email, we got telephone systems, we got webmail, we got web conferencing, we got video conferencing. You know, paper and whiteboards aren't enough, nor is email. Right? I mean, there's a vast spectrum of tools that you need to take a look at and decide what are the ones that are right for your organization. And I'm not going to go through these, but the tools you pick should integrate and support your innovation process. I mean, whether it's collaboration or social media monitoring, whether it's incubators. I mean, I know some firms that have internal incubators that are great. Ideation, business planning. I know one company that, surprisingly enough, said, one of the things that we think we're going to put in place for our people that want to innovate is they bought 3D printers and put them in place. And a few things that came out of them were kind of like, whoa, what's that? But then people started to go, I've got this idea, and I can draw this up, I can put it there, I can send it to a 3D printer, and then I can actually take this and show it to them. Now, down at the bottom, you'll note that I talk about prototype libraries of Bosch and warehouses at Mattel and Hasbro. They actually have, warehouses and buildings full of previous ideas. And I'm not talking about the ideas, I'm talking about the manifestations of toys, of tools, of things that have been done, things that are available from other people. And they encourage folks that are really looking at innovation to walk through them and look at them, right, to see what someone else has done. How many of us have gone, hey, that's a great idea, and gone out and found out that it's been done 100 times, right? Now, it still may be a great idea because the 100 before may not have worked, and they may not work for a lot of reasons. But the other one is idea archives, right? So there's lots of tools. You've got to integrate them into your environment. You've got to make them part of what supports that to make it happen. Communications. Communications, I just have to stress a lot. Innovation is a social process. We said success has 1,000 fathers. You'll find people out there that want to shoot every innovative idea that comes in front of them. You'll find people out there that embrace every innovative idea that comes in front of them. Neither one's right? But you've got to have that interaction. You've got to have that, because what you get out the end of the pipe generally be a lot better than what you started with if you've got that interaction, if you've got that communications. And communications happen a lot of ways. I mean, one of the things you have to do is foster connectivity. One of the processes I've used a lot of times in different organizations is, as you come in as an executive, you tend to have, your boss wants to have your time. He wants you to spend time with your peers. You want to spend time with your managers. And the question is, when do you get down to the people in the trenches, right? And part of what, I've done on an ongoing basis as practice is had weekly coffees, right, where, I would have someone else pick a cross-section of people from all different levels and all different, roles to come and sit down and talk and tell them in advance, tell them that we're there to talk about what they want to talk about, bring their topics, and let's have their conversation. They could ask me, any question, as long as it's, not non-public information or things that they're not allowed to know, from regulation and that kind of stuff. Then we can talk about those. And I'll tell you, it's done everything from fundamentally changed product offerings to how buildings ahead were organized to actually, getting a street outside between one of our buildings and the parking lot fixed because it was full of potholes and not lighted, which scared the women at night. So those cross-boundary interactions are important. You need to have those happen, right? Tunnel vision. Boy, tunnel vision, we're all guilty of it. You focus in and in and in and in and in and down and done. The worst instance of tunnel vision that I'm aware of ever, I'm sure there are others that are a lot worse. One of the precision flying teams that flew together for years, they focused very much on being on point with the guy in front of them. Well, turned out they were practicing one day, and the guy in front of them, the lead man, had a heart attack. He plowed into the side of a mountain, and everybody else plowed in right with him. Why? Because they were tunneled on being right where they needed to be according to the plane next to them without having awareness of what was going around them. And by the time they looked up and saw what was coming, it was too late. You got to get out of tunnel vision. You got to spread people's views. You got to give them information to work with. You got to connect ideas and money. I said before, money talks. This is how do you make sure that when people have ideas, they know where to go to get some funding, to get some resources, and do some things. You got to make it visible. These things can't be hidden, right? Yes, you're going to have some stuff that you're going to do that's going to be a waste of time, right? Get over it, right? It's going to happen. Some of them are going to be great. You're going to look and go, I will guarantee you that if you have 100 things come through the pipeline and you say which are going to succeed and which are going to fail, you'll probably be wrong at least on half of them, right? On half of them, right? Last but not least is communications for the employees. Whether it's newsletters, newspapers, blogs, internal websites, dashboards, make the innovation program, make what people are doing that's innovative visible to others. That's important. It celebrates success. It gives people a view of where you are and what you're doing, and it gives them a mechanism to talk to each other. Right? In the process, I want to talk about events. And events are important. I know one company that's a major has what they call an innovation day. And what they do is, this is a major organization. It's a worldwide basis. People submit ideas they have for innovations. They are sent off to a group that's a working group that makes a decision on what they like. The ones they like, they actually get to do. The people do a 45 to 60-second video. Those are posted up on an internal website. They're voted on. And they actually give recognition and rewards. People get to come on and talk about what they do, right? Some have innovation Oscars, right? And that kind of thing is very important. There's another group that does, what I will refer to as the innovation Razzies. They look at their great failures. They celebrate them. They go, and they celebrate them in the context of, wow, what were we thinking? How did we get there? What did we learn, right? But it also says it's okay to fail. I know people that are just as happy to have a Razzie as they are to have an Oscar, because it means they tried something, right? And I think that kind of leads us to the last point about events. Events are all about recognition. There's monetary recognition. Give them an innovation bonus, and some companies are very good. You bring something new, you bring something meaningful, you get cash for it. I can tell you, that a lot of times I've recognized people. I've given them, a monetary award and a plaque. And the money's spent shortly thereafter, but their plaque hangs on the wall in their office or in their cubicle or at their home forever. Why? Because that's recognition. And the non-monetary often has much more impact than the monetary. So don't just think about money on these things. So let's talk about the third part of the people, process, products, and that's products. And we're really going to look at two things here, results and metrics. And the results are what you get out as you do this, right? And we said before, innovation is a numbers game. You do one, you may or may not get it right. You do 10, you probably get one right. You do 100, you're going to get more than one right. It's all part of what you need to do. And certainly the classic people that invest in innovation and invention, the venture capitalists, understand this. They don't expect them all to win, right? And part of what you're looking at from a cultural standpoint is what's the number of ideas that you've actually got going? How many are there in total? How many are you working on? For the successful one, what was the value? Am I really generating ideas? If you're out there and there's this giant lull and no ideas are coming out, you may have a problem, right? You may have a problem in your culture. You may have a problem with how much people time have, all those kinds of things. And look at where they're coming from. Worldwide organizations, you find this one nexus of innovation that's really outstanding. You look at it and go, well, why is this different from my others? What's going on here? How do I learn from that? How do I make the others look at that so we can see it and replicate it? The corporate ventures is one of the things, and the really important part here about corporate ventures, when you look at the results of innovation, is it all about strategic return or financial return? There are strategic returns that are much more valuable than the financial returns, where companies get totally repositioned or they get a brand new image. Think of service industries, right? You're in a service industry, as well as a lot of product groups, your reputation is what people think of you, right? And so you do something that changes how people think of you, which is strategic, may not have a big financial return, but eventually it will have a significant financial return because people will think of you differently. They'll think of you better, or they'll think of you worse. If they think of you worse, you're probably going to get a negative financial return. If they think of you better, you're probably going to get a positive financial return. It may not show up right off, but it's a strategic return. And last but not least, I want to talk about incrementalism, right? And this comes back to the financial aspect of this again. Incrementalism basically says avoid all-in bets. I talked about the one company that did only kind of $20 million was the threshold for what they could do. I know one major organization that consumer products good, name well recognized that, you know, they have a very simple process, right? If you have an idea, you come to them, they go through it with you. If they think it makes sense, they give you a card. It's a credit card. And a credit card, you know, they started with $500. Now they're down. They do it with $200 because they found people really didn't need $500. You know, they had, I think right now they've got about 1,900 bets out there, things that they've started. Now, that's for the ones they started. There are some that are way down the pipeline where they've actually got things that are going to product and all that kind of stuff. But you figure, okay, so $500, you know, times 19, that's not a big number. That's not a big number to do that, to bet, to have people try things, right? So think about that. And when you think about coming back to the venture people again, you know, they may figure, look, we're going to have to commit this much to this over time for it to be successful. They don't give it all to the people in the beginning. You know, do this, you get this much. Do this, you get the next. You know, and we all know about tranches of investment. And if you don't, you should, right? Because that's the way it really works. Also, by the way, then you don't have to worry about killing a major project. What you're just really doing is not funding the next phase. That's all about the culture. It's all about coming up and trying. And the last thing I want to talk about is the metrics, right? And again, this comes back to what's out. It's, you know, how many people are trained? What's the number of seminars you've held? What's the number of events? Whether it's brainstorming or collaboration or recognition. If you got people internally that talk about innovation, that are innovators, how many people are following them? How many people are paying attention to them, right? You know, Drucker says you can't manage what you can't measure, and I'm a Druckerite, I admit it. So you know, the results that you can measure are the number of ideas, and how many ideas in total, how many are in the pipeline, how many were successful, what's the value, how fast are they being generated, what have our new offerings or services or products been? You know, I know one company that looks at their innovation program, and one of the things they look at very particular is their outputs with respect to social responsibility. How much of their innovation program has generated outputs that make them more socially responsible? So that's really all I want to talk about with products and metrics. A couple of things here at the end to touch on, you know, myths and pitfalls. You know, it's always good to know these. You know, one of them is that, you know, just because you read about innovation, you know, reading about innovation doesn't make you an innovator any more than standing in a garage makes you a car. All right, you know, you've got to practice it. You've got to do it. You know, if all you do is pontificate, that's very interesting, but that puts you in the category of a critic, right? You know, and critics don't actually do a lot of things. You know, many times, you know, book critics don't write books, and you know, plays don't write plays, or music or that kind of thing. You know, a lot of commentators and instructors aren't doers. So when you're looking at your program, look at what people are doing, not just what they're saying. The second one is that we've all been tight on our funds. You know, it's been a period where we have to watch our investments. It's been a period where we watched our costs, right? In a lot of cases, even when the business benefits are evident, organizations, you know, that are tight in resources, focus on what's there, what's in front of me, what's today. I know how to do this. I don't have time to learn something. I don't want to take the risk of doing something different. You've got to break out of that mold. And last but not least, you know, one of the common responses, by the way, is when you want to make these changes, people will challenge the experiments, and your first failures, people will come after, you know, aggressively. See, we told you this wasn't going to work. How many times have we heard that, right? All right, so that's a very common. So, you know, the only solution to this is a cultural change. It's not going to happen overnight. You know, you've got to have the right people involved in the experimentation and the planning in order to get the right context and convert people into supporters. They've got to have some successes. You know, winners try again. Losers, not so much. Right? That's really all I want to say on culture. I appreciate your time. This may or may not be the last in the series based on what people want from us, but thank you much again for your time. Goodbye.